Okay, I'll wait until the recording starts, or has it started already? Ah, there we go. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering Graduate Student Community Spring Seminar Series for 2022. Today we're hosting Adol Daver. This is March 9th, 2022. First thing, the community leadership team is hosting this. Roshan and I are the co-chairs this year. Our publicity team consists of Reza Alizada and Avinash Nayal. We've got support from Anirban Mondal, Emmanuel Hakazima, Swapnil Danayat, Nazli, Falani, and Andrew, and our faculty mentor is Farouk. We have regular leadership meetings. If anyone who is in attendance would like to join us, they are held on Fridays at 4 p.m. over Zoom currently. If you would like to attend, please email either me or Roshan. The emails are up here. Alternatively, you can just message us in the chat. The time is set according to the students, so if you can't make that, just let us know and we can try to move that. If you would also like to become a GSC member, we have an engage page, which you can join by scanning this QR code here. I'll leave it up for a few seconds, just in case. All right. We also have a Facebook page, which has information about all of our events, and also will, I believe, link to the YouTube recordings once we're done, if you would like to join that. The YouTube page has all of the recorded talks. If you can't miss it, or if your internet drops at some point, we have all of the recordings online. For any students in attendance, we also have the Dave and Susan Burt team room. It has couches, whiteboards, coffee pots, and all of the amenities that you might need for just kind of relaxing and getting work done with friends. Please email us if you would like access. One final reminder, we will have a Google form in the chat. Please sign up just so that we know how many people are attending. And then upcoming events, next week we're having Fatima, or not next week is spring break. The week after that, we're having Fatima Taranum talking about manufacturing of a high thermal conductivity polymer composite. And then after that, we're having Tim Philly talking about research opportunities and initiatives. All right, and with that, today's speaker is Adol Daver. I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with him. He graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay and got his bachelor's in metallurgy. He joined Alcan Metal Powders in 1967 and did his MBA. By 1987, he'd become president, and he eventually acquired ACuPowder International in 1995. He eventually sold the company at a huge profit and has since done a wide variety of community activities. From 2015 to 2021, he was the president of the World Zarathustra Chamber of Commerce, and he has a passion for promoting entrepreneurship in all its forms to youth. And with that, I will pitch over to you, Adol.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be invited today by Farouk Mistry and the team to address the aerospace and mechanical engineering graduate student community at the University of Oklahoma. So today's talk, as you're aware, is the magic of open book entrepreneurship. And I'd like to just start with a little bit of background. In 1995, we did a management buyout of Alcan Metal Powders to form ACuPowder International. The products that we produced basically manufactured non-ferrous metal powders of copper, tin, bronze, brass, and other non-ferrous metals. The applications for these powders is and we used to sell the powders for industrial applications such as PM or powder metallurgy self-lubricating bearings, filters, structural parts, which are used for automotive and home appliances, diamond tools, plasma spray, chemical catalysts, arts and graphics. So the biggest application is PM self-lubricating bearings, and being engineering students, you're probably aware of it. Essentially, powder is pressed in a die to form a green part with controlled porosity that is sintered at a high temperature under reducing gas to develop metallurgical bonds and strength. And then the porosity is filled with oil. So once it's in an application, when the shaft heats the bearing, the oil comes out, lubricates it. And essentially, when you shut the motor down, the oil is pulled back into the part by capillary action. So this is the reason we no longer need to go and put 3-in-1 oil in a lot of moving parts and home tools, home appliances and things like that. So the company that we purchased, Alchem Metal Powders, to become ACuPowder International, had a revenue of about $50 million a year, had 80 employees, and the profit was borderline profitable. Essentially, in good years, we made a little bit of money. Bad years, we lost money. It was a very small division of a huge multinational corporation. So it wasn't really getting proper attention. We would have a lot of presidents coming down for 2 or 3 years, or here's a small division, get some experience type of thing. And they would have different objectives. And we were pretty much spinning our wheels, I think. So basically, an opportunity came up where Alchem was getting rid of its downstream small companies and focusing on their primary metal. So I approached them and said that I'd like to do a management buyout, lead a management buyout. And after a while, they thought about it, and it sounds like yeah, that sounds great. We would have probably done it anyway, but we can't sell it to you at just any price. So we'll get it appraised. And if you agree to the appraised price, you can have it. If you don't, there'll be no negotiation. If you don't, it'll go to the open market, and then you can bid whatever you wanted to. So we got the number, and being a marginal company, we couldn't really relate the EBITDA or the profitability to a purchase price. So a lot of it is based on the assets. We had good assets, land, buildings, equipment, inventory. So anyway, we felt it was reasonable. Maybe we were playing a few extra million, but we decided we didn't want to lose the opportunity, and we accepted the offer. So we did an asset-based financing structure with companies like GE Capital, Congress Financial, IBJ Schroeder. They were interested, and we went with IBJ Schroeder. Just to give you an example, that right from the beginning, we wanted to be very entrepreneurial. We had to change our name and logo. And so we decided, well, let's get a pizza, and we've got 45 minutes to come up with a logo. So all the partners who I was planning to make part of the buyout deal, we sat down, discussed it. We wanted an A because Alchem was A. We wanted to stay in the front of the listings. The dots in the logo indicates powders. The capital C, small u indicates copper. So basically it was ACuPowder, and we thought we came up, without paying anyone or spending too much of an effort, we came up with a pretty good logo. This is what the plant looks like. It is 10 acres big. We have about 28 different buildings. The road in the front near the baseball field is Lehigh Avenue, and we were on Lehigh Avenue. And on the backside, you see a railroad track. The field, our company was started by a Professor Hall, who was a professor at Columbia University back in 1916. So it is a pretty old plant. The land in front of this, where the baseball field was donated by Alchem, and with the condition that it would be a little league field for Union Township. It was in Union Township. So it's a very significant field. If you want to give directions, you tell people it's across the Hall Stadium, and everyone would know where it is. Just a matter of interest, the building on the extreme left-hand side, which is like partially cut off and it's dark, that building was actually part of the Manhattan Project. So there's quite a lot of history related to the plant also.
Edul, question.
Yes.
Did the IBJ Schroeder, they were your basically venture capitals, basically? You funded the whole
No,
transaction?
it was a strict asset-based loan that they were not part of that they had no equity. It was strictly money borrowed from them, but the deal was based on our strong assets, and essentially we were about, the way they do the asset base, they'll give you 90% of the value of the land and 80% of the value of the buildings, and they'll come up with the amount of money they can loan with. They have the collateral. But we had about a few $1 million, which had no collateral. It was called an airball, which we got. And of course, we had to give personal guarantees, notes to cover the entire amount.
Okay, that's what I was getting to, whether you had to give a personal guarantee at the end of the day. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you don't have the confidence to give a personal guarantee, it's very difficult to get to get money beyond what is completely collateralized.
Okay.
And just interestingly, we got very close with IBJ Schroeder's um, account manager, James McConnell. And essentially, he would came in, walked through the plans, met with the people, and he talked to the employees, the unions, and then finally came back and said, "Look, we're doing the deal." And I remember very clearly, he says, because he said, I trust you, I like you, and secondly, no one in their right mind will build a plant like this today. So that was his rationale for giving us, finally approving it. Okay, so what were the risk factors? It was borderline profitable, as I already mentioned. It was an old plant with environmental issues. Now, Alcan had agreed it. ISRA was very strong in New Jersey in the 80s and 90s. And so Alcan had to clean up the site to ISRA standards. And once they cleaned it up, if any new contaminants was found or later, it would be our responsibility. We had a confrontational steelworkers union, a lot of constant grievances and arbitrations, and that was just a way of living at that in the 70s and 80s. It was a highly leveraged buyout. We put in only $200,000 to borrow 12 million. So it was a 60-to-1 debt to equity ratio. And obviously that meant we also had a very heavy debt load. So we couldn't afford for anything to go wrong, especially in the initial years. So the game plan was, essentially based on our experience and intuition. We said, what are we going to do different? We just can't do business as usual. So we had to switch gears from being, it's a division of a multinational company which had a lot of bureaucratic rules and requirements to a small private company. We had to change being corporate managers to entrepreneurial leaders. So 7 key employees, I led the buyout and I had the dominant share, but I invited 7 managers, leaders, if you want to call it, to become part of it, because I wanted continuity. I wanted them to be motivated. And, so I thought that was an important part of our formula, so to speak. Union employees, my feeling was I wouldn't really see the value of equity, because that benefit comes mainly when it's time to resell the company. They would like to see cash up front or some benefit up front. So we basically told them that, look, one, we are not going to do layoffs as a way of doing business. If business slows down, we're not just going to do layoffs. We'll absorb the employees, do miscellaneous work, cleaning, whatever is there. We'll only do layoffs if our survival was at stake. So that was something the union is not used to hearing. So it was certainly a major thing. And then we did another major thing and said, look, we're going to have an employee incentive award, which we called EIA. And it would be a powerful incentive and motivational vehicle where we'll be sharing a certain amount of our profits, pre-tax profits with all employees. So those were some of the things we pretty much did on experience and intuition. The old corporate model was, it's not my job, that's your job. Employees do as they're told. Employees punch their brain out when they punch in. Narrow job responsibility. It's we versus they, union versus management, frequent layoffs. And a lot of employees do the minimum to get by. So essentially, we had to change that mindset. And in the new entrepreneurial model, what we emphasized was, look, we have an opportunity, we are seizing the opportunity. We're going to have a clear shared mission and communication. We'll have, certain expectations of safety and environment, quality and productivity. And we treat people with respect and dignity. We're going to eliminate bureaucratic rules. I always felt that rules are for the, so-called for the birds, if you want to call it. We want things which benefit the company and not curtail people's creativity. A flat management structure. We were relatively small. For example, we had 3 full-time salespeople. One would cover the East Coast, one would cover the center of the country, the third one would cover everything west of this Mississippi, essentially. And on top of that, you would have a sales and marketing manager. And our feeling was that the area sales managers know the territory, they know their customers, and we don't need another sales and marketing manager to just double guess them all the time. So we essentially eliminated most of the middle management positions and had a very, very flat structure with about 12 people reporting to me directly. Empower people to impact their jobs, wide job flexibility. So, even the people on the shop floor were given a lot of flexibility to try different things and move us in the right direction. Teamwork and motivation. And again, a big part of our story is the stake in the company's success. So what were some of the things that we actually did? We had 3 co-equal priorities: safety and environment. Safety and environment was in relatively good shape. We had a corporate safety and environmental manager called Dick Riley in the 70s. He was extremely safety and environmental conscious. He was sort of my guru, if you want to call it, in that area. He traveled the world. He visited Alcan's Indian plants. He was fond of India. We got along beautifully. So that particular item was very much under control. Quality and service was a big item that we needed to improve. We wanted, my frequent quotation is that when you dance with the customer, let them lead. And, whatever the customer wants, we would bend over backwards to do it. If the powder for some reason didn't work, even though in specification, we would take it back. Service, if there's a need, we'll send out a service engineer right away. If someone orders by 12 noon, the material is in stock, we would ship it right away. Productivity, we had to improve productivity. To some extent, I was sort of liberal with the union contract when it came, but I was very, very stingy with the number of people. So if we were productive, had less people, we had a bigger pot to share with a smaller group of people. So productivity to us was ability multiplied by motivation plus or minus the environment. Now, ability is aptitude into training. There's very little you can do on the aptitude side. That's what you come, each one has a certain aptitude to do certain things. Training we can impact, that includes education and experience. So we can do a lot on the training side. Motivation depends on your need multiplied by the incentives. So as I said, for the 7 equity partners, it was equity, while for the hourly employees, it was more a cash bonus. And the environment is everything else. It could be the lighting in the building, the tools supplied, even the mood you come in with, anything and everything which changes on a daily basis. So the employee incentive plan was 20% of pre-tax profits to all employees over and above all existing union contract bonus awards. Whatever we had existing, we We didn't change anything. On top of that, we added 20% of pre-tax profits we've given up. Now, some people obviously thought that was very high. I did a lot of research actually, and to see what was in the field, and I found one company, the Duck Boat Company out of Boston, which did 20% similarly of pre-tax profit. So we said we are going to go with that. I had no qualms about sharing success. If we did well, I didn't see any problems in giving away 20% of the profits to everyone who contributed to doing it. And two, if we didn't do well, obviously you were not giving out anything. So, the slogan was, if you do well, you'll do better than you ever did before. If you do badly, we'll all be without a job. That 20% pool would be distributed we had a formula. 25% would be distributed equally to all employees, 25% based on your salary level, 25% on the length of service, and 25% departmental performance. We debated a lot about the performance area. We wanted departmental performance. We were a 24/7 operation. We didn't want people to, get a little extra production and leave the furnace in bad shape for the next shift. So, you look good, but the next shift looks bad. So we wanted a departmental performance. Also, later on, we did change this formula where we went 20-20-20 and increased the departmental performance to 40%. We would have a quarterly shop talk, and I would discuss the results, exactly what we did. We were completely transparent. Every single financial number was open book to them. We would, basically discuss it with them. And then the EIA, which is the Employee Incentive Award, would be announced. So overall, we looked at our business as more or less like as a game of business. We said we would work hard and play hard, make work enjoyable. Each person had a position to play within overall rules, but you had the flexibility. You could pinch hit, or, if you were playing soccer, we had a lot of employees who were from Poland and Portugal, and soccer was the big game. Like you cover for someone, you're playing right wing, but if you there's a gap somewhere. So everything was put in a context of games. And the goal was continuous improvement. No matter how good we are, or how bad we are, we're going to be continuously improving. We had to outperform the competition. If we didn't, that was a big measure of our success. And what we would say is you either do lunch or be lunch. Keep score. We had countless performance ratios all over. We would measure performance, we'd measure equipment utilization, we measure lost time accidents, recordable cases, you name it. Enjoy by celebrating wins. We would even have, people to guess how many pounds we would ship in the day, and every day that number would change. And at the end of the month, whoever came closest to the pounds that were shipped would get a $50 bonus or a ShopRite gift certificate. And those type of things we're constantly doing. Let's do the talking. Yeah, let the numbers do the talking. Sorry, let the numbers do the talking, and profits would follow. So then about 3 years after we were in business in 97, we came across a book called Open Book Management by John Case. And the cover of the book says, companies that practice OBM seem to have captured some sort of lightning in a bottle. So without knowing it, we were pretty much about 75% of it doing what the book said you should do. But one key element was missing. We had not provided formal business literacy education to the employees to understand the relationship between what they did and the bottom line. So we brought a professor in, lecturer in from a local union college. And basically we put together a program called 101 Business, and every single employee from the janitor to the president went through the same program. And it would be done at the end of the shift. So the people after they finished the 8-hour shift would stay over for an hour, and we would pay them on overtime to do that. It was well received. We had a few people where the material was lost on them and they would sleep through it. But I would say 95% of them enjoyed it, learned a lot, and it was unbelievable that they would start throwing all these new terms and in the daily talk, and it was a lot of fun and very, very beneficial. So the results were like magic, literally. Within 5 years, we were able to buy a small competitor in Tennessee. Our volumes and market share had doubled to over 40% with the same number of employees. Okay, so basically, to explain the program in a formal way, what is open book entrepreneurship? It's a way of running a business that gets every employee focused on helping the business succeed and make money. Enables every employee to develop business literacy and understand companies' critical numbers and financials. This is extremely important. As I mentioned earlier, we would have the pounds, monthly pounds on it. And some months where the pounds were higher, but the profitability was lower. So, they would come and say, what happened? At work, they called me in and they said, we shipped 200,000 pounds more, but our profitability is lower. So, and then you'd explain that, the margins on all the products are different, and the commodity type products where the volumes are high, the margins are low, profitability is low. And in some other products, the volumes are low, but the profitability is high. So it depends on the product mix that we actually ship that month. Employees accept responsibility and are empowered to move the numbers in the right direction. Employees see themselves as partners in the business with a direct stake in the company's fortunes. So that's sort of what OBM, Open Book Entrepreneurship, is. Now, how do we implement it? I sort of mentioned a lot of things, as I mentioned, we were doing from experience, but just to, in a formal way, provide clear information and communication, shared vision, strategy, and tactics. We were very clear what our priorities were. We had 3 co-equal priorities of safety and environment, quality and service, and productivity. And we would, basically measure, have objectives, make measurements. And when we broke records, we would celebrate. Provide business literacy training. This is absolutely key. Anyone going into it, this is extremely important. Business terms and basics, understand the financials. At the end of the year, we had a very pictorial, simple pictorial income statement. We would actually mail it home. We copied this from Southwest Air. Southwest Air had a similar thing they were doing. We were not bashful about copying anyone who we thought had a good, something good. And because we wanted the wives involved, we wanted the spouses, I shouldn't say wives only, spouses involved. So essentially they became part of the company. A lot of our celebrations that we did was also with spouses. Better decisions and less waste. This was very, very apparent. Sometimes when we would do projects, the engineering department would come up with a materials handling project, cost 50,000, 75,000, and the employees would come back and say, we don't think that 75,000 is well spent. Something here, if you can do this, which only costs 20,000 or 30,000, we would really appreciate that much more. So they really participated in what capital projects we did and how we did it. Employees have substantial say in one's own work. Each team would have work team huddles once a week, and they would discuss and say, here's something that we need to improve, or this thing is missing, we need this, and actually come up with suggestions for experimentation, and we would encourage that. And we tolerated failures. It was just accepted as a learning experience. Continuous improvement was the name of the game. I've mentioned that many, many times. Have a stake in the success of the company. Build enthusiasm, positive peer pressure. I'd like to mention a little bit more about positive peer pressure. Essentially, in the old environment, there would be some good workers and there would be some marginal workers. And being part of the union, as long as they did the bare minimum, they would sort of get by. There was very little you could do. So the momentum was always towards becoming average. The good workers say, why am I working so hard when the other guy who's not doing even half of what I'm doing is getting by? So there's pressure for the entire momentum to move towards marginal performance. In our system, there was peer pressure. The good worker will say, hey, that guy's moving off or not putting in his fair share, and my pocketbook is getting affected. So the pressure was on the marginal guy to become better. Celebrate successes. We've done everything you can think of in New Jersey. When we would have 1 year without lost time accidents, we would have a truck with a steak luncheon for every employee. We've gone to Great Adventure, we've gone to medieval times, taken cruise around Manhattan, and all these outings used to be with spouses, as I mentioned before. At one point, we had 7 years with no lost time accidents. So we were very proud of our safety performance. Share in the finance success, and that we've already dealt on many times. So essentially, why does it work? I think by now you get a pretty good idea of the reasons for it succeeding. Common goals outweigh parochial ones. It focuses attention like a laser on the objectives. It facilitates innovation and continuous improvement. Help managers lead rather than manage. Financial reward catalysts, motivation and peer pressure. Sources of mistrust and resentment vanish. Each employee behaves as a valued partner and entrepreneur. Nothing breeds success more than success itself. I remember at one point, the union president coming to me and actually saying, Ed, you better watch out for Joe. He's sort of sleeping on the night shift whenever he gets enough. At that point, I knew that the union had pretty much disappeared. It was there only in name. They were very much part of helping us succeed, So what were some of the hurdles and challenges? One is it should fit in with your culture. Our culture was very, if you want to call it, sports oriented, but you could mold it into any form that you felt fit in with your culture. Have a sound vision, good planning, innovative execution. No matter how good the vision is, the planning, you could have 2-3 companies who want to do the same thing, but it's the execution, the action, which is important. Maintain focus and lead by example. Very important. All our supervisors, all our managers were emphasized. Don't expect your people to do anything which you are not willing to do. We would have a problem in the middle of the night, and I would go into work at 2 in the morning, and my wife would say, why are you going in? There's nothing you can do. And that was true. There's nothing I could do, but the people, it would be moral support, and the people would appreciate the fact that I was there. Biggest challenge is to keep OBM and EIA center stage and prevent it from becoming an entitlement. This is extremely important. After a few years, our typical bonuses for the employees used to be like around $10,000 a year. And if that happened year after year, they would take it for granted. There was no incentive to improve further. So we had to keep it center stage, constantly talk about it, constantly make some fine adjustments. So, people, it becomes a point of discussion and is active. So yesterday, past performance is no guarantee of future success. We wanted to be sure that people didn't say, oh, we've done very well and we can take it easy now, or become overconfident. Overconfidence is hubris, and that's dangerous and can become lethal. And then today, there are new challenges. Every day is something new, and you have to earn your wings every day. Just because you were super duper last week doesn't mean you can't be super duper this next week, So tomorrow is new opportunities to pursue beyond resources available. And perhaps I should have mentioned that the way we define entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources available, controlled. So essentially, as an entrepreneur, we recognize the opportunity. We don't have sufficient resources, so we have to be innovative and uh, creative to get the job done with the limited resources. So this is an ongoing process which we have to continue doing. So that pretty much brings us close to the end. Again, I describe it as almost magic. At the end of 5 years, truly, my talking to my partners, we would say, boy, we were so worried when we started, and it actually succeeded so well that we were surprised at the success ourselves. The EIA payouts typically exceeded $10,000 per year per employee. So it was a substantial amount, especially for the hourly employees. They could go and put a down payment towards the house or help them buy a car. So it was a big thing when we would have a holiday dinners. I would get spouses coming to me and saying, Ed, that EIA is the best thing you could have done. We really like it. And it's important what the spouse thinks of the company, because if the employee is unhappy, maybe the spouse has a say, hey, you're crazy, you got such a good company who looks after you, why do you want to leave? In 10 years, we doubled our annual revenue from 50 million to 100 million with the same number of employees. So that showed that our productivity really paid off. As I mentioned before, I was quite liberal with the raises each year, but very stingy with the number of employees. At that time, a lot of countries were importing into the United States, and we were proud to say that we were actually exporting to countries like India, Korea, Taiwan, China. In China, essentially, a lot of the American companies who would set up shop there were so concerned about the technology being stolen. So they would ship the powder from here. For example, we had Dow Corning, where we would supply copper powder, which was used as a catalyst for silicons. And they've set a plant up in China. We would ship it to China, and when we would call it copper, we would call it like a material C or something like that. But that gave us an inlet into China. While in some of the other countries, India, Korea, Taiwan, it was some of our specialty products which we were shipping to them. Our market share had gone up to 40%, and then with the small competitor we bought, it went up to 50%. Now, this was an extremely high market share. Every household has at least 5, 6, 10 different components using powdered metals. I talked about the self-lubricating bearings. Even something like a greeting card. You see the gold in the greeting card? That's actually flake brass powder. So we were pretty confident that with 50% market share, that our powder was in every single home or household in North America. So that brings us to pretty much the end. Open book entrepreneurship is a powerful concept and tool. It can be utilized in almost any business environment. Fine-tune it to meet your needs. And we hope that if you use it, it'll be magic to you also. So good luck. And I think I took about 40 minutes. I was planning to do about 35. Hope we get a lot of questions, and we'll go on to that. So I'll go off.
All right, so I guess questions. Venki, you have a question specifically for Adol?
Yeah, Adol, a couple of things. During the the growth of your company, did the management get any kind of a payout? For example, did you have a dividend declaration or anything like that for the owners of the company?
Yeah, no, absolutely zero. What we had is every employee had his salary, which is so-called annual payout and bonuses, and everything about that went back to retained earnings to pay back the loan. So there was no real equity payout until the very end.
Right. I mean, one of the reasons for a success of something like this is a transparency aspect of it. In other words, the employees know how much money the company is making, how much profit is being made, how much is really being paid out of in EIA, et cetera, because that really makes them feel they're really a part of the operation, right? So did you discuss this to the great details, like literally showing all the details of this company operation?
Every single detail was there except individual salaries. Okay, personally, I had no problem even having to mention individual salaries, but the feeling was it will just create ill will between the employees. One will say, why is so and so getting this while I'm getting this? So except individual salaries, everything else was completely open. The hourly salary is all known. The hourly pay rate is known. So the salary that I'm talking of is only the non-unionized employees that we were not disclosing,
Okay, I think there was a question.
How do you manage the variability of the prices of your materials, because those are commodities, so it does affected your business? For example, you have a high price of copper.
Yes. Yeah, no, was a very big part of our execution, if you want to call it, because copper is a commodity. The price changes on a minute-to-minute basis. It's like a stock market. So we had 3 ways of pricing our product. If a big customer would come in and buy in what we call truckload quantities, which is 20 tons, we would go and buy a physical copper back to back. That means the minute the order was placed, we would buy the raw material within a minute of the order was being placed. For the smaller customers, we would base the copper price on the average COMEX of the previous month, because that would be part of the inventory, and the cost of the inventory, the raw material, would be the average COMEX of the previous month. But then a lot of the automotive companies wanted fixed pricing 6 months out, 1 year out. And for those people, we would buy contracts. We would hedge the copper. We would buy a contract, and when the time came for physical delivery, we would buy copper and unwind the contract. So we would not speculate on metal at all. Sometimes you could make some money on metal, but many times the whole company could go under if you speculated on metal, So that was the purchasing was a very important. You could make a very big mistake if it didn't cover properly the copper being used for it. A question to you all. A lot of you all doing PhDs. Any of you have entrepreneurial aspirations?
Professors are entrepreneurs, but intellectual entrepreneurs. They're not economic entrepreneurs, but we have to bring in money. We have to support students, which is the social entrepreneur side. We have to create knowledge. So many people out here want to be professors. So Rachel, I think you could start by suggesting how you are an entrepreneur.
How I am an entrepreneur? I suppose kind of in a similar way of just like transferring my ideas and kind of influencing when I eventually get my PhD, influencing future generations of students and kind of like encouraging growth in that kind of way.
But I'm sure even as professors, you do research and you might come up with something new, which potentially could be patented or could transform into a opportunity for commercialization, I would think, right?
I think Venki and Kumar could talk about these things from the University of Oklahoma perspective, and Venki from his own personal experience.
Edul, I used to work for the laboratories, and I invented a technology, and I started a company, and I told my management at Bell that I formed a company, and they were kind of shocked. So they said, okay, we'll start an entrepreneur program with you as an entrepreneur, keep your job in Bell and still run your company, right? I was elated. I thought it was wonderful. And then they said, go form now you got to work out a contract with Bell for the fact you're going to have a company. That's when I realized that the chairman of the company doesn't run the company. It's the lawyers who run the company, because they figured out that if they let me become an entrepreneur, I'm going to ruin their working schedule, because they like 9 to 5 job. They punch the clock and get out, right? And if I had more of people like me forming, they're going to have a pretty long stay every day trying to figure out all kinds of problems that are going to come up. So they just, essentially dangled me there for like a year and a half, me with my expensive, Manhattan lawyers arguing on my behalf. So I essentially was losing money day by day. And finally, I decided to leave Bell, and I became a professor at University of Maryland. And I took my company with me, and interestingly, the graduate students, they like to imitate their professors. And so the researchers in my group ended up creating almost about 25 enterprises, over the years. And I myself have formed about 5 different startup companies. So
Yeah,
and
if you look at it even now.
Pardon?
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I right now I have several active companies. There are about 4 companies that are very active. And so, but all the points you're making are really valid, because particularly in a small company like this, it has got to be a flat management structure, and you really got to get everybody involved in the operation of the company and set up the profit sharing plan, all of this stuff, so that everyone feels that they have a stake in the company. Yeah. What you did is pretty remarkable, I would say. Bringing that culture in there.
And I was just making a point that the Professor Everett J. Hall was a lead professor at Columbia University when he started the company. At that point, it was called Metals Disintegrating Corporation. That was the name. Sounds very funny, Metals Disintegrate. But anyway, so from 1916, he started the company, and it essentially, he and his family ran it through the 50s, sold it to Martin Marietta for a very short time, followed by Alcam, but from 1960s to pretty much 1990, and then ACuPowder International, Yeah, no one has asked, but maybe to keep the discussion going and to say, Ed, okay, you did well, but I'm sure you had some problems too. What were some of the problems you had? And yeah, so we had our share of the problems too. In 2008, 2009, during the recession, it was rough going. That was 2 years where we just broke even. That was the 2 exceptional years where luckily that recession came half in 2008 and half in 2009. So in both cases, we were very close to break even. But there, really what we did was we went to a 4-day schedule. Okay. Now with the union, you normally lay off the junior most people, and the senior most people keep working. And we convinced them that, look, we shared equally in the good times. We want to share equally in the bad times. So we basically, everyone went to a 4-day schedule, and we gave them a choice. You work 4 days, you get 4 days pay, or you work 4 days, and basically, sorry, you get paid for 4 days, but you work 5 days. And then we would make up the 5th day after the recession got over. So there were a few employees who took the 4-day schedule with a smaller salary and didn't work the 5th day. But the majority of over 80% worked the 5th day. So in a way, working at a lower pay cut, but with the trust that they'll get paid back. And we were able to pay everyone back by the middle of 2010. Everyone was, made up for that loss. So that I thought was, in a way, quite innovative, that we were able to convince the union to work more or less like a non-union employee, The other big disadvantage of problematic is we had no succession plan. Being flat, you're very lean, and if something goes wrong, someone leaves, you really are stuck. You're dependent on every single employee.
How the COVID affected your business? How the COVID crisis affected you?
No, unfortunately, fortunately, I should say, we sold our company in 2010, and I retired in 2012. So fortunately, I didn't have to be faced with COVID. But I'm not sure they managed. I mean, the new owners still there. Business is still going strong. So I'm not sure what they did differently or how they managed during COVID. But we would have probably, if we were still there, if business would have really dropped down, we would have probably been in the same mode of 2008, 2009.
All right, I see there were a few questions that were asked in the chat. Karishma, I think you've asked 2 questions. Do you want the mic or?
Thank you, Rachel. Adol, one question has already been asked and answered beautifully. The second question is more into the technical and the research progress. When one manages a company and has a PhD from the university or an engineering degree from IIT, one possibly keeps one eye on technical advancement and how it relates to cost, how it relates to research. So 2 questions. How did you effectively manage research into the fabric of your company? And more pointedly, if somebody came to you with a new research idea, was that part of the open book management, or did you let that person quietly sort of beaver away at their idea? How did you manage that?
Basically, we did no fundamental research. Okay, if we had something very novel to look at, we would work. We had projects with Penn State University. We did some projects with MIT. So we would let the graduate students work on it under, a professor who was very, very knowledgeable in the powder field. Everything that we did was applied research, okay, and mainly based on customers' suggestions. The customer would come and say, "Oh, I need a powder which has more growth or less growth, or some special characteristic." So we were pretty much using our customer as a place for experimentation, if you want to call it. We would come up with a powder, and you can't keep working on it till it's perfect. So you get to a point and say, "Okay, let me try it out." You give free powder to the customer. You go over there, because even on the lab scale, it works in a particular way, but when you scale it up, it doesn't necessarily work the same way. So we would go and use the customer's facilities as more or less a research, laboratory. Do it, and if it worked, the customer was very happy. We had a new product, and a lot of the developments we did, we shied away from getting patents, because we were too small to. People would find a way of getting around the patent, and then you have to protect the patent. So there were a lot of small things, and we did what they call the invention record, which means that when you came up with something new, you documented it, you got it notarized. So you were protected with that particular invention. So even if someone new comes up with that same invention, you have documentation that can continue using it. And then we wouldn't talk about it, and we would hope that no one would be able to copy it. But we kept all our so-called manufacturing and minor product differences just confidential. But I would say we were coming up with new grades of products. Almost every second month, there would be something new that we would offer to the marketplace.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And the link between academia and industry, and how that can nurture the student and the process of advancing technology, while the market doesn't have to invest heavily into mentoring the research student. So that dialogue is very, very helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have another question in the chat from Claudia Maldonado.
You're
Claudia,
muted.
you're muted. We're still not getting any sound from you.
Your
about now?
volume? Yeah.
Oh, now we are.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you, Edul, for your time. I'm always interested in the people side of things. So can you talk just briefly about how you selected those key employees for equity and if there were any lessons learned or things that perhaps you would have done differently, or did that process go very smoothly?
The 7 employees, actually 6 of them, they all were in relatively important locations and positions. And when we had the idea of going independent, we had talked to them and made sure that they were interested in it. So essentially, it would be almost every major position in it. The 7th person actually, there are 2 of them, if you want to call it, had no college, that hadn't even been to college. Okay, they grew up from production worker to a shift supervisor to a production superintendent. And they were absolutely thrilled at getting equity. It was their home. If there was a problem, they would spend 24 hours at the plant if needed. So I thought that was important, and that one of the people I wanted to bring in was the 7th person, where I finally reduced my equity to enable him to come in, because I thought it was important. We stayed together for the entire period, so we must have doing something right. We didn't have anyone, any major quarrel where someone left or didn't do. So I think as a team, it went off very, very well. At the time of the sale, most of us were over 65 years old. So, and we were, started to think about it when an equity company came to us. However, the youngest person was very upset because he didn't know. He said, why are we selling? I still have 10 years to work. So that was probably the one issue we had, that for one of the 7 partners, it was a little too early. Then after selling up, worked for 2 years, and frankly, that 2 years seemed an eternity. When I would advise that if you are running a company, you sell, leave as soon as you can, because things start changing, and it's very difficult to accept the changes.
Brilliant. Okay. Anybody else have any further questions for Adol?
In the human resources side, Claudia, you mentioned, I just want to point out that from 95 to 2012, we essentially ended up with only 2 arbitrations, and both the company won. So I would not go to arbitration or bend over backwards to the benefit of the union, unless it was like I was 100% sure. Because it's a gamble. If you've got you think you're right, the arbitrator doesn't necessarily think you're right. So unless we're absolutely sure, we would not go to arbitration. So only had 2 arbitrations in the 17 years or whatever. And basically the grievances, as I said, I tried my best to compromise and settle it. And actually the supervisors sometimes would be upset that, why am I supporting the union so much or something like that. I was said, no, if it's a clear-cut case, I'll support you. But if it's a borderline case, we don't want to unnecessarily waste time on it.
Do you think the reason that you have a lot of layoffs was because you didn't engage the union employees, and you want to get rid of the union employees, or what?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that clearly. Could you?
The reason they had those layoffs are because they want to get rid of the union employees, or they're trying to control the union, or what?
No, basically the union employees, and we worked well. Again, I didn't hear the question clearly, but I think what you're asking is about the union. And we had a very structured union, and they would have like a verbal warning, a written warning, a second warning before you would get suspension. So, but we never really needed to use the disciplinary process that much. As I said, with the way they were working, they felt part of the company, and most of them were staying within the guidelines. I'm not sure if I answered the question. Farooq, did you relate it if you heard it better?
Yes, okay.
I've answered.
Actually, yeah, more or less what I was.
Yeah.
Venki,
Edul, I have
you
a
had a question?
question. Yeah. So when you did this EIA decision between your various divisions, right? Then I can imagine that would be a little bit of a touchy issue because each division would claim that their contribution to the business is of different valuation and so on. Or did you make like a broad based, like if 7 division, okay, we're going to split this money by the weighted average of the people and sort of divide it that way? Is that how you did the allocation?
You mean the performance portion of it,
Right.
right? The others was pretty straight cut. It was like, one quarter was everyone got equal.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so the performance part of it, we had numbers for every department. What was the performance? What was the equipment utilization? So we had measures which
Metrics for each of
clearly
them.
indicated how they were doing. So I don't think we never really ran into serious issues. Sometimes people would ask questions and we would explain it to them that, here's the productivity of the copper production versus here's the productivity of the bronze area. And clearly there's a difference, and that's what's reflected in your EIA, Yeah, so that again, the measures would be based on these 3 criteria. One would be in safety. So, if you had no lost time accidents, we are very, very particular about that. So as a measure of performance, that would be one of the factors. Did your team have any lost time accidents? And the second would be quality, good time, first time, good quality. And then it would be productivity. And we had a very quantitative measure of productivity. It was performance multiplied by equipment utilization, which gave us the productivity number,
In your experience, how do you will deal if you have to, for example, instead of having, you have a few employees and the rest are subcontractors, and you have to manage all those subcontractors in order to deliver a product?
No, we only had full-time employees, no contract workers. The only time we would have contract workers is if there's a capital improvement going on, a building is making built or some equipment is being installed. But otherwise, all the employees were full-time employees. We had no part-time employees, no outside contract employees. We did have a few people in the sales area, some distributors. We had 3 full-time salespeople, but for certain special areas like the diamond tool industry, where there are a lot of diamond tool industry customers, small amounts, there would be a sales agent or distributor who would be working and get paid on a commission basis for the volume they generated for us,
So what was your kind of management structure, Edul? You were the CEO, and then
Yeah.
you had all the different product line managers, and then you probably had someone for HR, and you had other supporting organizations in the company, leaders for that.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially, you had
CFO.
the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer.
Right.
You had 2 production superintendents. We had broken up the plant into 2 areas. We had 2 production superintendents. We had the 3 sales and marketing employees. We had 2 technical, one of them which was mainly customer service, and the other one was working on applied research. So each of them reported directly. We had the production control person and the quality assurance manager. So all of them reported just directly to me. And they had pretty wide leeway, so they're pretty much but had the trust that they can run their own ship. I only get involved by exception, and a purchasing manager. I left that. I'm not sure how many I covered, but I think that was the.
So how often would you organize company meetings with the, the seniors, your senior team to discuss strategy, progress, et cetera? I mean,
we would have very short meetings once a week on Friday, but our longer meeting generally maybe once a month or so, and then a real significant meeting every quarter, which would pretty much be in time with the shop talk. We would call where we meet with the employees a shop talk.
mm-hmm.
Everyone would meet in the library, and we would chat for about an hour or so. And usually a lot of comments would come up at the shop talk, and we'd use that to talk in our sort of major management meeting, shortly after the shop talk.
Yeah. I mean,
Now, we also did something quite unique. Once a year, we would have a retreat. We would rent a condo on the Jersey Shore, right on the ocean. We would go on like a Thursday evening from Thursday to Sunday. All the 7, 8 of us, including the spouses, we would rent 2 condos. We would talk in detail about how we did the year before and the year after. Part of the section, we would have the spouses participate in it. And we would have a good time. We go out for dinner every night for 3 nights. So that was like if you want to call it a retreat, a 4-day retreat once a year.
Wonderful.
It was a mini vacation on the Jersey Shore.
Okay, further questions from anyone?
Comments, takeaways?
All right.
Ali, takeaway. Prakash, takeaway. Rohinton, Roshan, takeaway. Janet, takeaway. Venki, takeaway. Karishma, takeaway. Rachel, takeaway.
Yeah, my takeaway is that I think what we now know as the employee stock option in the startup ecosystem and the IT sector, that was started long back by pioneers like Edul. That's my takeaway.
To me, shareholder value is part of the problem,
Yeah, yeah.
large corporations.
Yeah. The only thing is that the startups come without baggage, but the challenge you might have faced is that you had a baggage of the past, being a large, the old culture. How to forget the old culture and inculcate new culture is more difficult and challenging than starting totally from scratch. Yeah, so I agree that it was a bigger challenge for you.
And that was definitely a challenge, but I had one advantage that I had grown up with the company in the sense that I worked only for one company. I started with them in the research area, went into production. So the employees, everyone had known me for a long time. So it's not like someone new coming in and starting to change the culture, So they had a certain extent of trust and credibility already built in,
Yeah. Okay. That was an advantage, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing all your wonderful experience.
My pleasure. That's wonderful.
I think there are lessons here for the university in terms of open book management, in terms of how things are done, this sort of stuff. And certainly for universities that are top down and who do not believe in sharing information. And this doesn't give a feeling of belonging to the employees or to the professors. Whereas Edul, what you did was you got trust from the employees, that you were concerned about them and you cared about them. So you built a family essentially. So they felt that they belonged to this family, and therefore there was open communication and what happens at the. So I think if universities followed a similar model, things would be very different. And for those of you who are going to be faculty, Rachel, if you set up your lab with this sort of attitude, similar to what we do in the systems realization laboratory, which is very similar to what Edul was talking about, you'd get good value from your graduate students. So with that, Rachel, I think you should probably stop.